All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going deep on traffic and parking in Springvale Activity Centre. Looks like we've got a pretty good set of sources to work with. Meeting notes from the city council, a traffic study, even a full-on plan for parking signs, and then a summary of what they've actually done with the signs so far. Should be interesting to untangle all this and see what's really going on.
Yeah, it seems like the city council has their hands full, trying to keep residents happy, attract development, and make the place walkable all at once.
Absolutely. And looking at these meeting notes, that roundabout where Balmoral Avenue meets Buckingham Avenue, it's a real hot button issue. Residents are worried about pedestrian safety. They want a crosswalk there.
But here's the thing. The traffic study found that cars are moving super slow through that roundabout. Plus, no pedestrian accidents recorded for the last 5 years.
So if speeds are low and no accidents, is a crosswalk even needed?
Good question. The council seems to be laser focused on pedestrian safety, maybe even more than vehicle traffic in this particular area. They've got this thing called a transport hierarchy. Basically, they rank different modes of transportation, in terms of priority, and pedestrians are right at the top.
Okay, so they're really prioritizing making it easy and safe to walk around. So then does that mean they're going ahead with the crosswalk?
Well, they've actually looked at a bunch of different options, each with its own pros and cons. For example, a traditional crosswalk right by the roundabout. But that could actually cause more congestion and even create some new safety issues for drivers.
Oh, so it's not as simple as just throwing some paint on the pavement then.
No, not at all.
What other options were on the table?
They also looked at installing traffic signals, make things safer for everyone crossing. But that gets expensive quickly. And it could make pedestrians wait longer to cross, which isn't ideal either.
So what seems like the best way forward, based on what they're prioritizing and what the data is showing?
Well, given their focus on pedestrian safety in that transport hierarchy, it seems like they might be leaning towards some bigger changes,
Yeah.
like pedestrianizing part or all of Buckingham Avenue.
Pedestrianizing, like no cars at all. That'd be a pretty dramatic change.
It would. We'll dig into that idea a bit later. But first, how about we talk about those signalized intersections mentioned in the traffic study?
You mean the ones at Warwick Avenue and Lightwood Road, and Virginia Street and Springvale Road? What makes them so important?
Well, the analysis shows those intersections could handle way more traffic if they were signalized. And that's where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's so interesting about boosting traffic capacity at those intersections?
This could unlock a massive amount of development potential in Springvale. We could be talking hundreds of new dwellings, thousands of square meters of retail and commercial space.
Whoa, that's a lot of growth. But more development usually means more traffic, more demand for parking, right? How are they going to handle all that?
Well, they've already started making moves on the parking front. They've put in a whole new parking wayfinding signage system, which means bigger, easier to read signs at all the key spots.
So no more squinting at tiny signs trying to figure out where to park?
Exactly. These new signs are designed to guide people straight to the bigger car parks, the ones with at least 100 spaces.
That's a good start. But parking could still be an issue with all that potential development coming.
True. They've got some longer-term plans in the works to deal with that. Things like real-time parking availability signage, telling you exactly how many spots are open in each car park.
Oh, okay, that would be super helpful. Anything else they're cooking up?
They're also looking at expanding the Warwick Avenue car park, maybe even building a multi-deck structure there. And there's some chatter about allowing a left turn from Springvale Road into Lightwood Road. But that needs a thumbs up from the Victorian government.
It's like a giant jigsaw puzzle with all these moving parts. Make it easier to drive and park, but also prioritize pedestrians and cyclists. And then on top of that, they're planning for all this new development.
You got it. And that brings us back to something we mentioned earlier, the potential for pedestrianizing Buckingham Avenue. Seems like they're considering some pretty bold changes to make Springvale even more pedestrian-friendly.
I'm definitely curious to hear more about that. It sounds like a major change with potential benefits and challenges.
For sure. Let's explore that in the next part of our deep dive. So, about pedestrianizing Buckingham Avenue. It's a big move, for sure. And the traffic study really lays out the good and the bad there.
Okay, let's break it down. What are the upsides of going car-free on Buckingham Avenue?
Well, first off, no more vehicle traffic on that stretch. Obviously, that means it's way safer and more pleasant for people walking or biking.
I can see how that'd create a more relaxed vibe, more community-focused. But what about people who need to drive there? Wouldn't cutting off vehicle access be a problem?
That's the trade-off, for sure. The on-street parking along Buckingham would be gone. And while there's off-street parking nearby, getting to it wouldn't be as straightforward, especially for anyone with mobility issues.
That's a good point. Sounds like the council's going to have to figure out how to soften those downsides if they do go ahead with pedestrianization.
Yeah, you're right. The meeting notes mentioned they're looking into things like better accessibility to those off-street lots
Yeah.
and improved pedestrian connections to the surrounding areas. They're also planning to get a lot of community input before making any final calls.
Makes sense. Getting feedback from residents and businesses is going to be key for figuring out if this is a right move for Springvale.
Exactly. They've even talked about having events, maybe even temporary closures on Buckingham, so people can actually experience what a car-free street would feel like. It's a good way to test the waters, see how the community responds.
Speaking of testing the waters, earlier we were talking about potentially signalizing those two intersections, Warwick Avenue and Lightwood Road and Virginia Street and Springvale Road. What kind of impact would that have on traffic flow?
Well, the traffic study suggests that. With signals, those intersections could handle a lot more traffic, which, like we said before, could open up a ton of development opportunities.
So by making those intersections more efficient, they could potentially handle all the extra cars that would come with new housing and businesses.
That's the thinking.
Hmm.
And the traffic study actually put some numbers to that potential. Signalizing Warwick and Lightwood could support an extra 550 dwellings and almost 2,000 square meters of retail or commercial space.
That's significant. What about Virginia Street and Springvale Road?
Even more there. We could be talking 1,250 new dwellings and over 4,000 square meters of retail or commercial space.
Wow, those are some big numbers. Sounds like the council's really thinking long term. When it comes to managing growth and development in Springvale,
Absolutely. And their long-term plans definitely reflect that. Remember those upgrades we talked about earlier? Like the multi-deck car park expansion and the real-time parking availability signs? Those projects show they're serious about investing in the infrastructure to support this future growth.
that forward-thinking approach is encouraging. It sounds like they're really trying to anticipate the needs of a growing community
Yeah.
and put the pieces in place to accommodate that growth.
Exactly. And that brings us back to that new parking wayfinding signage system they've put in. Might seem like a small change, but it actually plays a big role in making the parking experience smoother and more efficient.
So it's not just about making the signs bigger and easier to read. There's a more strategic purpose behind it.
You got it. The wayfinding plan really emphasizes clarity and consistency, which are crucial in a busy area like Springvale. Those bigger signs are strategically placed at decision points, guiding people to car parks with plenty of spaces. It's all about minimizing that frustrating experience of driving around in circles looking for a spot.
Ugh, what a relief. Nobody wants to waste time searching for parking. So by directing people to the larger car parks, they're increasing the chances of finding a spot quickly and reducing congestion at the same time.
Exactly. Win-win. But let's be real. Even with better wayfinding, parking's always going to be a challenge in a busy activity center, especially during peak hours.
That's true. So how are they planning to deal with that inevitable parking crunch, especially as Springvale grows?
Well, that's where those long-term plans come in. Imagine driving into Springvale, and you immediately see signs telling you exactly how many parking spots are available in each of the major car parks. No more guesswork, no more wasted time circling around.
That would be a game changer. It would take so much stress out of finding parking. It sounds like they're really committed to making things good for drivers, even as they prioritize pedestrians and cyclists.
Absolutely. It's about creating a welcoming and accessible environment for everyone. Speaking of accessibility, the traffic study pointed out some issues with where the loading bays are currently located.
Right, the truck parking area behind Multicultural Place. What's the problem there?
Well, it's great for the businesses right there,
Right.
but it creates some safety and amenity issues. You've got delivery trucks sharing a narrow lane with pedestrians, which isn't exactly ideal from a safety perspective.
Especially in an area designed for community gatherings and events. Seems like a bit of a clash.
It is. And all that truck traffic brings noise, exhaust fumes, sometimes even water contaminants, which really takes away from the atmosphere of Multicultural Place.
So relocating those loading bays seems like a good idea. What are the options?
The traffic study looked at two main possibilities: moving them to Balmoral Avenue or to Springvale Road.
Both of those options sound like they could create their own set of problems. What are the trade-offs there?
Well, relocating the bays to Balmoral Avenue might solve some problems at Multicultural Place, but it could create similar issues on Balmoral Avenue itself, especially if they end up pedestrianizing that street, like we talked about earlier.
Plus, wouldn't that impact the already limited parking on Balmoral?
It would. And it could create congestion problems around the entrance to the Balmoral 8 car park.
Yeah.
So, yeah, not a simple solution.
And what about moving the bays to Springvale Road? What are the pros and cons there?
Well, on the one hand, Springvale Road is already a major thoroughfare, so adding a few loading bays might not have as big an impact on traffic flow as it would on Balmoral.
But wouldn't that make it tougher for people to find parking on Springvale Road, which is already in high demand?
That's a valid concern. And there's another thing. The council has plans to create a Springvale Boulevard, which involves adding trees and greenery along Springvale Road. Relocating the loading bays there might clash with that project.
I see. So it's not just about finding a new spot for the loading bays. They have to think about how that change will impact all the other elements of their vision for Springvale.
Exactly. It's all interconnected. Every decision has ripple effects, and it's important to try and anticipate those effects before making any changes.
So after looking at all these different pieces of the puzzle, what are the key takeaways for someone like me, who's just trying to understand the big picture of what's happening in Springvale?
I think the most important thing to understand is the council is taking a holistic approach. They're not just tackling problems in isolation. They're thinking about how everything fits together to create a vibrant and functional urban environment that works for everyone.
So it's not just about cars or parking or even pedestrians. It's about finding solutions that benefit the whole community.
Exactly. And that's a complex undertaking with lots of competing priorities and perspectives to consider.
But it sounds like they're committed to finding that balance and creating a better Springvale for everyone.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember this is an ongoing process. It's not something that'll be solved overnight. There will be bumps in the road. And they'll need to adjust as they learn more about what works and what doesn't.
And that's where community feedback becomes so important.
Yeah.
The more people participate and share their thoughts and concerns, the better equipped the council will be to make smart decisions that really reflect the community's needs.
Absolutely. So if you're interested in the future of Springvale, make your voice heard. Attend community meetings, take part in surveys, share your ideas. Every voice matters in shaping a thriving and inclusive community.
Well said. This has been a really insightful deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from roundabout safety to parking signage to the potential for major development.
And we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore.
Exactly. Stay tuned for the final part of this deep dive, where we'll delve even deeper into the council's plans for Springvale and uncover some thought-provoking questions about the future of this dynamic activity center. You know, we've talked a lot about the specifics in Springvale, but I'm curious how this all fits into the bigger picture of urban planning, this idea of prioritizing pedestrians and cyclists. Is that something we're seeing in other cities too?
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely a growing trend in urban planning. More and more cities around the world are realizing that. Creating people-centered spaces makes them more livable, more sustainable, and more enjoyable for everyone.
So it's not just about Springvale. It's about a fundamental shift in how we think about cities, how they function.
Exactly. But this shift brings up some interesting questions too, like how do you balance making things easy for drivers with creating a more walkable, pedestrian-friendly environment? It's a tough challenge for city planners everywhere.
Especially in a place like Springvale, which is already a bustling activity center. With all those existing traffic and parking demands, it's like they're walking a tightrope, trying to make everyone happy.
They are, and their decisions about parking, traffic flow, pedestrian infrastructure, all of it's going to have ripple effects on everything from the local economy to the quality of life for people who live and work there.
Yeah. What kind of impact do you think these changes could have on businesses in Springvale?
It's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely something to think about. If parking becomes harder to find and traffic patterns change, some businesses might see fewer customers, especially those who are used to driving right up to their door.
That's a good point, but could also create new opportunities. Maybe attract businesses that cater to pedestrians and cyclists, or those that benefit from being in a more vibrant, walkable area.
Oh, for sure. Think about cafes with outdoor seating, bike shops, or businesses that offer delivery. They might actually do really well in a more pedestrian-friendly Springvale.
It's interesting to think about how these changes could reshape the whole character of Springvale over time. It's not just about traffic and parking, it's about the evolution of the area as a whole.
Absolutely. And it shows how important careful planning is, thoughtful consideration, and a willingness to adapt as things change. The council needs to be thinking about both the intended and unintended consequences
Yeah.
of their decision.
And it sounds like community engagement is going to be crucial throughout all of this. The more people share their thoughts, concerns, and ideas, the better the chances of creating a Springvale that works for everyone.
Exactly. You know, the meeting notes you shared mentioned a draft Springvale Revitalization Action Plan. Have you had a chance to look at that?
I haven't yet, but it sounds like something I should definitely check out. What kind of info does it have?
Well, it lays out the council's long-term vision for Springvale, including their plans for traffic, parking, pedestrian infrastructure, economic development. It's a great way to understand their thinking and see how all these different pieces fit together.
So it's like a roadmap for the future of Springvale.
Exactly. And it's a living document, meaning it's subject to change based on community feedback. So I encourage you and all our listeners to read the plan, attend community meetings, and make your voices heard. Don't be afraid to share your ideas and concerns with the council.
That's a great point. This isn't just a spectator sport. We can all play a role in shaping the future of Springvale.
Absolutely. And don't limit yourself to just thinking about the immediate issues. Imagine what kind of Springvale you want to see in 5, 10, even 20 years. What kind of atmosphere do you envision? What kind of amenities would make it a better place for everyone?
Those are great questions for all of us to consider.
They are. Because at the end of the day, the future of Springvale is a collective effort. It's about residents, businesses, visitors, and the council, all working together to create a thriving, vibrant community.
Well said. This deep dive has given us a lot to think about, wouldn't you say? We've explored the complexities of balancing all those competing needs, the importance of using data to make decisions, and the power of community engagement in shaping the future of our urban spaces.
And hopefully it's given you some food for thought about the changes happening in your own community
Yeah,
and how you can get involved in shaping the future.
exactly. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the traffic and parking situation in Springvale. We hope it sparked your curiosity and given you a better understanding of the challenges and opportunities facing this dynamic activity center.
Until next time.
Keep learning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.